welcome back to my channel, Made to Order a la Orden. I'm Chef Z, and today I am back with another Chef Z tips video, and we're going to be discussing the difference between all-purpose flour and cake flour. Now, as I ramp up a bunch of these baking and sweets recipes here on my channel, I wanted to take a moment and discuss what the differences between the two are, because while they are similar, they're also pretty different. So to start off, all-purpose flour has a higher protein content than cake flour. All-purpose flour has a protein content of about 10 to 13% depending on the brand, and cake flour has a protein content of about 8 to 9%. Now, why does the protein content in the flour even matter? And that's because the protein in the flour turns into gluten. Now, you've probably seen a bunch of baking videos or taking any baking classes where they always tell you, hey, be careful not to overmix your batter whenever you add the flour. And they tell you that because they don't want you to activate the gluten in the flour. And the gluten is what can make your cakes or your cupcakes really dense and really tough. And that's what you want to avoid. So as you can probably imagine, the lower protein content in cake flour is actually going to give you a cake that is so light, so airy, and just melt in your mouth delicious. And most of my recipes will call for cake flour. However, let's just get this straight right now. That does not mean that all-purpose flour won't give you a cake that's light and airy and just as delicious. Cake flour is just going to give you a cake that has a slightly smaller crumb and just slightly softer. It's honestly a personal choice. Now, you can substitute one for the other just fine, but I do want to let you guys know that it is not, and I repeat, it is not a 1-to-1 ratio. And it depends on what kind of cake flour that you're using. And when you go to the store and buy the cake flour and you look at the box or the bag, it's going to tell you what that substitution ratio is. And most of the time, it's going to be that 1 cup of all-purpose flour is going to equal 1 cup plus 2 tablespoons of cake flour. And that's one way to do the substitution. Another way to do the substitution is to use a kitchen scale. And if you don't have a kitchen scale, I encourage you guys to make the investment because it is really worth it. It costs about $10 at Target or Amazon. And I'll link the one that I have down below that I'm just obsessed with. It works really well. And one of the ways you can do the substitution is if a recipe calls for 12 ounces of all-purpose flour, then you can weigh 12 ounces in cake flour, and there goes your substitution. Now, you can find all-purpose flour and cake flour at your local grocery store, but they're gonna cost a little bit differently. In fact, cake flour is slightly more expensive than all-purpose flour. And my advice to you is that if you're baking a bunch of cupcakes, or if you're practicing, or if you're baking a bunch of cakes for little kids, go ahead and use all-purpose flour because it's going to be just as delicious. And I tell you that because using cake flour for every single recipe can very easily become expensive. Now, like I said before, I personally prefer to use cake flour for the majority of my recipes, but if I'm making bread or muffins, I actually prefer to use all-purpose flour, and I'll definitely specify. But nonetheless, you can always use one or the other, and they're gonna come out pretty delicious. So there you guys have it, the differences between all-purpose flour and cake flour. If you have any questions, visit my website, chef.zee.com, or comment down below. And until next time, I'm Chef Z, y buen provecho.